Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Golden Llama Show. We have today an amazing opportunity to speak with Tim Neal, who's an entrepreneur and his approach to health seems to be outstanding. Tim, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. Thank you for the opportunity of coming to speak to you. My name's Tim Neal. I'm from a small town in the UK called Boston, which is the original Boston. The American Boston named it after us. It's in the east of England. I started out as a really happy kid, but then I went through a lot of trauma around school. I got bullied by a teacher, which turned into me having a lot of trauma and having a lot of problems to deal with. But it actually got me to find myself and find my passion in life, which is helping other people out of that deep hole that I was stuck down in. So I ended up in a really deep hole of anxiety, depression, panic attacks, PTSD, and severe anger. It's been my journey to reverse all of that that's led me to where I am and led me to the discoveries I've found around how to help other people out of those kind of situations. Well, actually, funny enough, it's not to help them. It's to help them help themselves, because only we can heal ourselves. And that's what I've learned along the way is a set of tools and techniques that I learned myself that allowed me to set myself free from all of that stuff. We've developed that over the last 10 years, working with over 1,500 people, I think, between me and Tracy, my business partner. We've evolved it to the point now where we've got this amazing toolkit that can teach people, that gets them back in touch with themselves, gets them to be able to learn to speak the language of their body so they can hear all the subtle cues, all the subtle messaging and stuff, because the body's got all the wisdom we need. You might not remember everything in your mind, but your body remembers every tiny little bit of it. So when you get access to be able to tune into that messaging within yourself, it's got all the answers for you to heal yourself and get back to who you really are. And that's kind of our ultimate goal when we're working with people. It's not to create dependency and long-term coaching clients. Our goal is to get somebody self-empowered as quickly as possible so they can go inside and heal themselves. It's through trauma. Let me give you an example that I always use with people. What I want you to imagine is you get up in the morning, you put your foot in your shoe, and your shoe's got an invisible tack in it, and it sticks in your heel, and it is agony, right? So what I see in people is it's when they're in some kind of traumatic incident or whatever, and trauma doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just more than you can deal with in the moment. This is what installs these kind of programs. So let me give you an example that illustrates this. So what I want you to imagine is you get up in the morning and you put your foot in your shoe, and in your shoe is an invisible nail that sticks into the bottom of your heel, and it's absolute agony. So if you try to walk now on that heel, what would you do?
Well, depends if I was aware of the nail or not. Some people
Well, you
might
think,
get used to the nail. My posture would be different. The first thing I would do, I would look at my foot and see what's causing me discomfort.
but I pretty much guarantee you, your body will make you limp to keep your weight off it.
Yes.
So what I want you to do is think about what is a limp, right? So the limp is your body installing a program that modifies your behavior to keep you away from pain. We get something painful happen, and then the body installs a program that then keeps us away from that pain because we don't want to experience the pain anymore. And then that ends up us not being a true expression of ourselves. We get many of these. Every time there's an overwhelming experience, we install what I call a splinter. So if you think about a wooden splinter, a big piece of wood comes along, hits us, breaks off, and then that goes inside. We keep away from it, and we keep other people away from it because we want to protect it and we don't want to feel the pain. But eventually it will heal over. And now if someone touches it, it's kind of okay. But if they grab us right on it, we still jump because it still hurts because the splinter's in there. So an emotion comes along, we can deal with so much of it. But then when it gets to more than we can deal with, this energy has to go somewhere. So we take it inside and shove it somewhere to hide it. And then we keep people away from it, and we stay away from it because it hurts and we don't want to experience that pain. Right. But then the brain installs the program, the emotional limp, if you like, to keep us away from experiencing that pain. And I believe it's that that leads us away from ourselves. Because you can see it in people when you start pulling the splinters out, they start saying things like, God, I feel more like who I really am now. Because they'll often speak about how they've got behavior that doesn't make sense. And it's not them, it's just how they're showing up at that moment. And again, I believe that's caused by the avoidance of those parts of you that cause you pain. Does that make sense?
How they define, how would you say that this trauma that we are running away from is defining our lives?
Well, it's defining our lives because if we're unable to access parts of us and unable to be a true expression of ourselves, there's something inside of us, like the observer of us inside us knows we're not being ourselves. And often people will come to us and go, but I don't know who I am. I said, yeah, but you know who you're not. People always know, when you do something and you're like, yeah, that was me. I did that. That was fantastic. Like, because it's in line with your ideal that you're holding your self-image.
Mm.
But then you'll do something or say something where you upset somebody, or maybe you were nasty to somebody, and it's not you. In order for you to know that, either of those, you must have some sense of who you really are inside. So when you're not being that. And when you're not being that, it diminishes your self-esteem. It diminishes your self-confidence. I call them the selfies, like self-confidence, self-belief, self-worth, self-esteem, all of that stuff to do with the self is diminished. And your connection to yourself, the relationship you have with yourself is diminished when you're not acting in line with your values. So that's how I see it affecting people massively. Because as soon as you shift that stuff, and then people start, as soon as I started acting in line with who I truly was inside, my self-esteem just soared. And so did all the other stuff, and all that stuff I'd struggled with my entire life disappeared in 2 or 3 months of doing this work and just chipping away the splinters. So then I can get back to being able to act who I am, which is I'm an extremely loving, kind person who just wants to connect with people. I love these kind of conversations. I love connecting with people and helping them out of their holes and stuff and having those deep conversations. That's who I am. But that wasn't how I was showing up in the world before, because I was struggling. And I was so lost and so disconnected.
Would it be okay to call it that those layers, those traumas were fighting us and we were fighting them? That itself caused this friction. And you can notice that actually those people get very easily tired and they don't have energy to face the world. Would you say that it's something like that?
100%. Good observation. That's absolutely 100%. Now I can speak to this personally again because I'd been suffering with the anxiety, depression, and all the other stuff from the age of 7, which then when I was 16, I was kind of getting my head around how to be. And some friends and I were walking uptown and we got attacked by a gang of men. So I'd been really, really struggling. And again, I've kind of done a lot of mindset work. I've done 13 years of mindset work. I'd learned to cope, which is one of the things that I hate to hear in the world is people learn to cope. Because I don't know about you, Andy, I came down to this planet to have a wicked experience, not to learn how to cope, but that's what I was doing, just coping. And then my mum and my dad got sick and then they both died very close together. And I didn't realize at the time, but I suppressed the grief so deep that, like you say, it takes a lot of energy to suppress this stuff. It takes a lot of energy to have those layers and layers of trauma and not dealing with it. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back. It was what floored me. So I ended up with chronic exhaustion. My thyroid went, adrenals went, I just ended up in bed. It never really came back until I went on the course where I learned how to process trauma and emotion, where I learned the initial parts of what I do. And after that weekend, I came back with about 80% of my energy back. And I didn't do anything physical. All I did was release that pain and anguish and suffering for years and years and years. And funny enough, when I got to the part of the course where we did grief, I didn't even know that I was dealing with that grief around my mum and dad because I'd blocked it so well. And when that came out, I can remember it bubbling up inside me, and I was terrified to go there. I thought I'm going to cry in front of everybody. And being a man, that was a big thing because I'd that conditioned into me from growing up. Don't cry. It was like bubbling, bubbling, bubbling. But I could feel like a ball underneath this layer of crying. It's the only way I can describe. And then when it hit me, I just started laughing and laughing and laughing. And what was coming through me was all the love that I'd suppressed because I didn't allow myself to think about my parents, who I adored. As that came through me, I must have laughed for about 5 minutes. And then when that had gone, my perception of the world changed. The colours got brighter, sounds got clearer. You know, we were in London on a course.
Mm.
When I'd got there, I had social anxiety that on the tube, on the underground to get to there, I was terrified. When I left that course, I went on the underground and I was chatting to everybody. And I just loved being around that many people. It completely changed the way I perceived the world and was decoding my reality. And like I say,
Mm.
80% of my energy came back.
But tell me, since people are so afraid of facing that pain and they put it away in places where they cannot find it, how can one be confronted by those traumas in a way that it's healthy to work? They hide them in places where they cannot find them. How do you approach them? And how do you say that they need to go through those processes?
The usual way of approaching any of this stuff's in the mind. And the mind really amplifies the kind of fear of it. So it appears like a really scary thing to go and face that trauma. And that feeling's real within the person. It was within me. But what we do is we teach people how to safely go inside and feel and start to speak the language of the body, to learn how to feel into things, to learn what the different feelings mean, to learn what the location where they feel it. You know, we often have things show up in our throat or in our chest or in our stomach
Mhm.
or somewhere in our body. So we teach people how to work with it on that feeling level. And they soon learn that it's not as scary as they expect it to be. There's a lot of trust involved on the first session with somebody because they just have to trust you that they're going to be okay. But once they get that feeling of trust within themselves, then we teach them how to go and do it for themselves because obviously you're with yourself all the time. We look at that and teach that as a gift because that'll take you another level deeper to remove another one of the trauma. You know, and it's not actually removing the trauma because trauma is your reaction to whatever happened, but it's the wound that's left by the trauma that we're really healing, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. But
Yeah.
could you explain to the audience what do you mean by language of the body?
Okay, so if you think about thoughts are the language of the mind and feelings and sensations are the language of the body. So I mean the way your body's speaking to you. So if we take an example that everyone understands, I'd fallen off my bike and hurt my knee, and she was cleaning my knee up and it was really sore. And I remember crying and saying to her, Mum, why do I have to feel pain? And she said, because your body's telling you that that part of you needs some attention. And I didn't realize how profound that was when she told me that, because that stuck with me from being a little kid. So if you think about it, your emotional system's no different, right? So when your emotional system's giving you some emotional pain, it's just telling you to pay attention to that part of you. We're so numbed out from feeling truly what's going on inside of ourselves. We don't notice the subtleties of it. We're mastered at numbing out. You know, this could be with TV, with alcohol, with watching movies, with sex, with drugs, with gaming, with whatever it is. people are so good at numbing out and not
Mm.
feeling that stuff that it becomes a habit. So they just create this mechanism within themselves that whenever they start to feel something, they just distract themselves. I used to numb out with drugs, alcohol, weed, anything I could do to self medicate because I was in so much pain. The last thing you ever want to do when you're in lots of pain is to poke that pain and make it worse. But that's the only way to heal it, is to face it. It's just getting people to learn how to face it safely so it's not overwhelming. Once you learn how to do that, it's actually relatively easy to heal anything. And I'm not just speaking from, I've personally worked with 820 odd people and seen it over and over and over, no matter what people come with. You know, it can be anxiety, depression, panic attacks, fears, phobias, you name it. Because they're the symptom, it's usually an overwhelmed nervous system, an oversensitized nervous system. When you process the stuff out of it and desensitize it, they get to then regulate their own nerve system, and that stuff doesn't overwhelm them anymore. But if you take a pin out of your foot and it no longer hurts, you no longer
Mm.
limp, and they no longer limp emotionally. So all of that stuff just melts away usually. I just took all the trauma out and all of that stuff disappeared because that's the manifestation of that in your body.
It seems like it's a very similar process to uninstalling faulty programs from your computer.
So what we were taught originally was to just uninstall the program. And that was a big relief. It was like I'd had 1,000 tons lifted off me. I suddenly felt light, buoyant, and able to be myself and whatever. But I still had some social fears, like speaking in front of people and things like that. So then what I did is I started rewriting that and creating new programs, you know, by putting myself in those situations and then processing whatever I needed to, and then creating a new story around that. So I went from being one of the limping programs I had installed as a kid was I don't like talking in front of people, right? Which I actually do
Mm.
like talking in front of people, especially if I've got some message to share like this. People are amazing, man. People are just so incredible. We all are, right? And we just have forgotten or we've been trained out of how amazing we are. And that conditioning, that kind of domestication that we process, that we go through growing up, where if you do this, you get told off. If you do that, you get a pat on the head. If you do this good thing, we'll reward you. If you do the bad thing, we'll punish you. And end up leading you so far away from who you are that when you start removing that conditioning and removing the trauma and you get back to who you are, you don't really need to be taught anything because you're just your magical self and your natural gifts and talents start to emerge. So, like mine is now, I'm a natural speaker. It doesn't faze me. I just enjoy doing it. I enjoy sharing this message with people. Once upon a time, that would not have been possible. So, it's a two-pronged thing. You take the trauma out, install a new program if you want one.
And alignment itself, it means embracing who you truly are and going through the pain so you can release the pain and you can be yourself authentically. What is the number one blocking point for people?
It's just unprocessed trauma. And also, I think the number one thing, actually, thinking about it, is just disconnection from self. You know, that
Mm.
relationship we have with ourself, and I teach a big piece around that relationship. That relationship is the most important relationship any of us have. And it has to be the first and it has to come first. If it doesn't, none of the other ones work properly. And I've seen this over and over again. And it's not selfish. We've been sold this thing in our societies that it's selfish to love yourself. It's selfish to big yourself up. It's selfish to love on yourself. It's selfish to tell people you're good at things. You know, as long as you're not an idiot with it, it's not selfish. It's selfless because the more you're full, the more you can fill other people. You know, when you start operating from your overflow because you're so full, and I don't mean full of yourself in a bad way, I mean fully just acknowledging your gifts and talents and just knowing that you're enough. You know, when people know they're enough, they completely transform. And the way they show up in the world for everybody else is way more. So that's not selfish. That's a selfless act in
Mhm.
my mind. I'm more there for other people than I ever was when I was feeling really low and didn't ever speak how good I was or that I was good at things or that I put myself first. And first thing I did this morning was I go for a walk, right? Because that lights me up and gets me in the flow for speaking, and
Mm.
then I'm more for you and I'm more for my wife and I'm more for everybody else in my world because I understand that putting those things first, but not having that relationship with yourself. And so many people I speak to talk about how they beat themselves up and talk crap to themselves and put themselves down and put themselves last. If you had another relationship in your life, how long would that person hang around if you treated them like that? Not long. So it's like, I think
Uh,
that the number one thing on this planet is that lack of connection to self.
and do you think that trauma happens because we are not enough and ill-equipped to deal with it?
It's bigger than our nervous system can handle in that moment, but I don't think it's bigger than ourselves. I think we're giants. It's just we've been conditioned to think otherwise. Any single one of us can do anything anybody's ever done. Yet we don't think that because we're our own limiting force. Whenever I talk to people, it's always like, does anyone ever hold you back as much as you do? And everybody says no. So it's that image we hold of ourselves, the self image, that governs how much of our power, personal power, comes out to play. And that's what we unlock. Is like when you can unlock that personal power, then you'll shock yourself. I cannot believe my life is like it is now. I used to struggle to speak. I would not have done anything like this. I wouldn't speak to you. I don't know you. I don't know what you're going to ask me. I could not have ever imagined that was possible because of all the conditioning and the pain I'd been through. Because there are people, I've got a friend who's like that. He's so sorted and so in flow because he's never had to deal with stuff like that. But it makes a huge difference. That it's that trauma that limits our self-expression. Only if you process it.
Only
If
if you learn
like if
from it.
but also if you release the kind of limitations that it's created, then it'll make you stronger. Because the trouble with trauma is it's like I remember speaking to one of my clients in particular, and she was a gym fanatic. She used to go to the gym a lot.
Mhm.
And I said, imagine it like going to the gym of you, right? So you've had to carry these really heavy traumatic weights. It's like a rucksack on your back. Each one of these traumas is like a rock. You put it in your rucksack each time you experience it, and you've got to carry that weight. Imagine you've been carrying that weight now for 10 years, and then you process all of that stuff out, so you haven't got it anymore. You're still left with the resilience of having to deal with it. So that's made you stronger, but now you haven't got the weight to carry. So I think it's a combination of both. I think it can make you stronger, but it can also weigh you down and make life really difficult if you don't actually process it.
So it's how we use it. How can we use the self-image so it serves us?
This is a part of learning to speak the language of the body.
Mm.
Because when you learn to speak that, it gives you the answers to what's in the way of your self image being a true reflection of you. Because my self image, let me give you an example. So I was a DJ in the 90s, I was a house DJ, and my DJ name was Tim Tom. And Tim Tom was also my family nickname from when I was a kid. So everything attached to Tim Tom was positive and powerful. And like I did really well. I ended up playing all over the country, played in Vancouver. My identity with my DJ kind of self was powerful. I could do anything. Tim
Mm.
Neal, I hated Tim Neal because of the image I held of myself as a kid being bullied, being taken advantage of, being pathetic at times, cowering down to people, letting them control me. That wasn't an empowering image to have about myself. But
Mm.
now you'll see on the bottom of this, I've put Tim Neal, and I'm now proud of Tim Neal because by doing that healing work, my self image is strong. my self-image is powerful now. I wouldn't say it's perfect, and I wouldn't say there aren't ways I could improve it, but for the whole majority of the time, it's really
Mm,
powerful. And I don't doubt myself
sure.
anymore. I am my own cheerleader. I am my own coach. So now that turning that around has completely changed everything. Take some action. You refer to your self image. So if someone says, "Can you
Mm.
come on my podcast and speak?" I look at my self image and go, "Yeah, I love doing that." Not, "Oh my God, what if I get it wrong?" Which was all the things I used to think. So I think it is a thing you can adjust, and you can turn it into a powerful force.
Do you still use your DJ persona?
When I DJ, yeah, 100%. No, I don't need to use it anymore because it was a bit false anyway, because it was very drug fueled. But I knew at the time the drugs weren't false. The drugs kind of unlocked me
Mm.
and took away my inhibition so I could be myself. And I'm so grateful for that experience because that showed me who I am. Because up until then, I'd got no evidence. I kind of knew I was in there somewhere, but I had no evidence of it showing up in the world and how that would interact with other people. But actually, I first became a nightclub dancer on the podiums in a nightclub, and then I was a DJ. I connected so strong with the audience in every way I could. And it showed me like, that's you, that's inside of you somewhere. Let's go and find it. When I started looking after my mum and dad, I had to stop DJing. So my mission became, how can Tim get up to the level of Tim Tom without chemical assistance? So that became my mission. It's interesting. Now, you said, do I still use my DJ
Yeah.
persona?
And you said
Um,
no.
no, not really. Only when I DJ. But actually, even my present day DJing persona has changed because now it's not drug fueled. Now it's natural. I don't even drink when I play. I just play completely straight, which means I play much better actually. And I enjoy it much more because I'm in control of it and it's much easier to do because I know what I'm doing. But no, I don't use that because my own kind of persona shines through and it's strong. It's strong and it's got a lot of evidence now that it's okay to be me, and that's what kind of reassures it. You do the work, clear the stuff out of the way, and then you start trying out being you and actually seeing yourself interact with people and seeing that it's working and that it's cool. It kind of reassures you that that's the right version of you. I don't really drop into that DJ thing anymore. I just use it as
Mm.
the reference to speak about, really.
I honestly love it. The message itself, it's okay to be me, and the fact that
Yeah,
you
man.
had to go through so much to find yourself. And the funny thing is, when we check underneath the bed to see if there is a demon, it usually is nothing there. But we need to do it
Exactly.
ourselves. Tell me, if people would want to connect with you, where can they find you?
So probably the best way to find us is on the website. So it's www.theriseandshine, THERISE and SHINE.co.uk. If you just go on there, and the best thing to do with us, if you want to really know how this could help you, just book a discovery call. They're free, and you get to hear this in greater detail and aligned to whatever you need.
Thank you again for tuning in to another episode, and stay tuned for the next one.
Thanks for having me, man. Much appreciated.